at the Gray Institute, we start with applied functional science. That is the truth of what's happening in the physical world, the biological world, and of course, the behavioral world. We take a look at those first truths about scoliosis. We realize that it's an abnormality, it's a disease, it's a malmotion of the spine and the rest of the body due to gravity and ground reaction force. We know gravity and ground reaction force have something to do with it. Therefore, when we begin to develop our techniques, one strategy has to be to respect gravity. In other words, yes, we can do things horizontal to gravity, but most of our work will need to be upright against gravity, and most of our work will need to be done with ground reaction force and taking advantage of ground reaction force. Huge strategy relative to the physics of it all. We also know it's a movement disease, and therefore we have to take advantage of mass and momentum. We therefore probably won't be horizontal a lot, and we probably won't be doing a lot of isometric stuff, simply because it's not a static disease and it's not a perpendicular to gravity disease. And we don't want to overstabilize with a table and create an environment where there's a table where we want this dear young lady or dear young man to be able to function and actually combat subconsciously their scoliosis in an environment that's natural, that includes nothing but gravity, ground reaction force, and their body moving, i.e. mass and momentum. We know that scoliosis is a total body problem. It's a total body compensation. It's a total body disease. Therefore, it's a chain reaction disease, and therefore we have to treat it as a chain reaction. We have to understand what do we use as drivers in the body in order to facilitate the chain reaction that we need in order to provide the proper mobility and stability to combat the curve, to go after whatever we think is causing it, and we don't know it causes it, so we're going after everything plus the kitchen sink, especially if it's your daughter or your son. And therefore, we have to have a chain reaction approach to this. We know it's a neuromusculoskeletal disease. Therefore, neurologically, we have to constantly ask ourselves, what are we doing proprioceptively, and are we fooling the body proprioceptively, or are we giving the body an opportunity to develop the proprioceptors so the proprioceptors then can take advantage of bringing the body back to normal alignment, because it's a neurological reaction that would do that. Is it a muscular disease? Of course it is. It's a movement disease, it's a neurological disease, and therefore we have to understand muscles to the point where we're not going to just take muscles and artificially try to strengthen them or have them go through concentric contraction. We're going to take the muscles, what they normally do, through an eccentric contraction, load them first, and then through a concentric explosion, so that happens the way it normally happens. Totally different, again, than the exercises we see in many of the textbooks that try to treat scoliosis. We also realize it's a skeletal disease, so not only are we talking about the bones, but we're talking about the joints. And we have to appreciate what we want to do with the joints, not only move the bones, but move the joints relative. In other words, relatively speaking, when we move in the sagittal plane, we move in the frontal plane, and we move in the transverse plane, we not only need to know the real motion of the bones, but the relative motion of the bones to appreciate and respect that this is a joint disease as well. It's a three-dimensional disease. And what interesting thing about that is we have to keep all three planes of motion in mind when we go after this abnormal curve, because we know two other truths that we haven't talked about is the body will follow the path of least resistance. So we might be treating the C curve appropriately, but if it's able to bail out in the transverse plane, basically we're increasing the curve by thinking we're helping it in the frontal plane, because the body will follow a path of least resistance. Same thing in the sagittal plane. So you'll see we have a 3D strategy where when we go after one plane, we concurrently go after the other two planes of motion. So we have to understand it's a path of least resistance disease, and we have to then create a better path of least resistance. Huge, huge significance. The other strategy is it's a subconscious disease. In other words, we don't think about how to correct it, and therefore we can't really make it something that goes through our patient's brain to say, hold that and have the brain be a part of the reflex. It has to be a subconscious reaction to the whole situation. As indicated, it's a type 1 deformity. Therefore, to correct it, we're going to have to go type 1 deformity the other way, but to get a type 1 deformity the other way, we may have to appreciate that we're going to have to facilitate a type 2 reaction in order to find success. That's going to make a lot more sense as we get into the treatment. just kind of put a little asterisk by that one and say, whoa, 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 whoa. He says, type 1 deformity, to beat it up, we're going to have to go a type 1 deformity the other way, but obviously then add in the sagittal plane because the type 1 deformity is frontal and transverse. But then he said we might do a type 2 reaction where we might work on one plane successful and then go after the other plane, or go after the other plane, this transverse plane that's successful, then go after that frontal plane, all the meanwhile understanding what's going on with the sagittal plane. A little confusing, but if we understand the truth, it's something that we have to take in consideration. Again, when we look at the research studies that have been done with exercise, none of these truths were taken into consideration. It's a C curve and it's an S curve. We're going to need to approach this thing top down if it's a C curve a certain way and bottom up a certain way. But if it's an S curve, we're going to have to treat the superior curve top down and the inferior curve bottom up. And then we're going to have to ask ourselves, and are we doing the right thing at the middle of the curve? Because if the middle of the S curve we're not doing the right thing, then it's going to compensate. The S curve will get worse on the top and the S curve will get worse on the bottom. It's a mobility and stability problem. Therefore, we're going to have strategies to create proper mobility to create the path so the path can be a path of least resistance. But then we're going to have to then immediately go into a stability exercise that proprioceptively takes advantage of that new path so the body says, you're now free to go here instead of staying in that scoliotic curve where you feel comfortable, you feel normal, you feel properly compensated, and we're all saying, wow, that's not where I want them, therefore I have to understand mobility and stability. We know it's a flexibility, strength, and endurance problem. Therefore, we have to create proper flexibility exercises, at the same time strength exercises, and understand that mostly these have to be done in an endurance type exercise in order to facilitate what needs to be done throughout the entire day. Scoliosis is a 24-hour disease. It's a 7-day-a-week disease. It's what they call this 365 disease, and therefore we have to have that in our knowledge bank in order to come up with a strategy to say we're going to have to come up with a way that we take advantage of that and make it a part of your lifestyle. We know that scoliosis is a scary disease. We have to somehow take the fear away, create an environment where we give the parents and we give the person that has scoliosis, that beautiful young lady, that beautiful young man, the opportunity to understand that they're going to be in control of what happens and that we're going to empower them. It's a self-conscious disease. It's a disease of frustration. Therefore, we have to become a part of their team to say, we'll be frustrated together, but we're going to fight the frustration by doing something significant. And as indicated, it's a life-changing disease. We therefore have to know what we need to do for them. It has to be something that they can do every day. We're going to give them the guidance from our clinic, but it's something that has to be a part of their lifestyle. It'll probably need something that needs to be done a daily basis at their own home, and we have to then be able to encourage them with proper tweaks to allow them to gradually be more and more and more successful through their mobility and their stability, through their flexibility, strength, and endurance, and give them targets to hit so they are motivated and they can see the progress and that we take advantage of the power of tweak. We also have to understand that it's one of these things we have to somehow make fun. We can't say, here's a Xerox piece of paper, here's some exercises that we know don't work, but this is our best shot at it. We got to step back and say, I am going to evaluate you. I'm going to look at your response to what we think is the best way to treat this. The treatment is the analysis is the treatment. We'll tweak it, and we're going to work our butt off in order to see if we can't basically reverse this curve. We're going to work our butt off, if nothing else, inhibit the progression of this curve. We're going to come together as a team, you, my dear person, and your parents and your family, and everybody else who wants to be a part of it. We're going to come together as a team, and we're going to understand the truths and the strategies in order to come up with the techniques in order to properly take care of you and literally document the fact that you had this curve, and now 6 months later, your curve has gotten less. I think we're on the right track. That's our ultimate goal, and we believe with understanding the truth and coming at this from a multidisciplinary and a multi-truth and a multi-strategic approach that we can give every child an equal opportunity to fight this nasty disease and to live a healthy lifestyle and not be labeled that child with scoliosis. That's our hope and prayer.